So it's like, so in math, what is this called? Hold on, let me draw it out real quick. Obviously, I know this is a line, right? But a line with two finite ends. Is there a name for that?
A segment.
Segment, okay. So this is, let's call this the segment of good and bad, literally, all right? Segment of good, bad. I've been telling this to kids, and they understand it. All right? So on one end is bad. On the other end is good. And we all have the potential of falling somewhere within there. But what I tell the kids is where you fall on this is determined by your choices. So for like a teenager, right? Like choices, they could say, was that a bad choice or a good choice?
Yeah.
But what this shows them, man, is that everybody has the potential to be bad, because we do. Mm-hmm. And everybody has the equal potential to be good. It's two ends of the same segment.
Yep.
And there's just degrees of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning, value, belief, I think puts a more experienced person, that's where they'll fall on this. But I think, like Jung said, what do you say? You say it better than me. Something about to the roots of hell.
Oh yeah, a tree can't reach to heaven unless its roots reach to hell. And Tolkien taught me that. Lord of the Rings taught me that.
This right here?
Yeah.
That's a thing?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. And then like someone drew it. I kind of saw it like draw it up like this, like, and then choice. Mm-hmm. Like that's a powerful thing right there, man.
Yep.
Hey, you know what? That was like complete natural conversation. Let's start the show with that.
Okay.
Play the music. What's up, everybody? That was like just natural conversation, but
we were just recording.
I just looked down and saw that the red button was pushed and didn't even know that was a thing. So let's start episode 54 with that. Like we always say how we would have these types of conversations even though we weren't recording.
Yeah.
And there was one of them. That was just literally stuff that we talk about.
Yep.
When we're talking on Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
Play the music, dude. Check out this new beat, y'all. We're going to let it go for a little bit.
Welcome to 54.
Yeah. Welcome. I hope it's a good one for y'all. That legit woke up my mind.
We're doing something different on episode 54 over here.
It was like the childlike spirit led into this dope beat.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool what music can do? Like finding new music.
Order
that experience.
Order and chaos.
Yeah. It straddles that line.
It straddles excellence, man. It really does. It's a combination of so many different variables that just creates this harmony that's really interesting when it hits right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too how it varies from person to person.
Yeah.
Like what my perception of what brings me awe is different than yours.
Yeah. See that I've always been more shocked by the fact that there's more people, like that there will be collections of people that think, well, this is good. Yeah. Like I get everybody having their own individual taste. It's always amazed me, like when I went to the Travis Scott concert, it's like thousands of people. They're like thousands of people like relate to this music like I do. It's crazy. It's crazy that there's like a universal connection.
Yeah.
But then it's not for some other people. You know, like,
I mean, I instantly go to it's what the person is, mm-hmm. and just their expression.
Yeah.
How authentic is it?
You mean the artist or the listener?
The artist,
Yeah.
the anything for that matter.
Yeah.
Like people gravitate to Travis Scott at that type of level because he's chosen that path. But that same resonance can happen at the lowest level possible.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think a lot of stories try to tell us that, like, you can have excellence right where your 2 feet are. It's like Acres of Diamonds, that really interesting personal growth book where the essential meaning behind it is maybe there's diamonds right underneath your feet that you're just not looking at.
Yeah, I like that.
Or that you're not looking for.
Yeah.
It's like, so wherever you are, like create something, dude. Dig and find those diamonds.
Yeah. I just think it's cool when an artist,
And if they're not there, then keep moving on. But
Yeah,
shoot,
go
check
look somewhere else.
Check.
I just like I automatically wonder like what is.
Oh yeah, I got to tilt. Man,
Oh
don't
yeah,
forget
there
the
you
tilt.
go. There you go. I
What
gotta
up, party people.
I gotta wonder what is that person tapping into archetypally, like, or universally, that would cause thousands of people to rage inside of a stadium together. And I'm like, that's powerful. But you're right. Like, you can still have that same
Yeah.
energy at the person that you work with.
Yeah. Yeah, let's send it, man. Let's start 54 with, some versatility and showing we can talk cognitive science, but we can also talk spirituality and conscious research. But a certain level of consciousness has an attractor field to it. So, your emotional state, which is direct equivalent to your level of consciousness, has an attractor field to it, and what you bring forth into your life is manifested through that and because of that. So that's just stuff I've read from Dr. Hawkins. He's the one that discovered consciousness research, or really kind of like spearheaded it with his discovery of how kinesiology can determine truth from not true, and essentially what's true is supportive of life and what's not true is destructive of life. It just it does not come from the true source, whatever that may be to you. Maybe that's that underlying ethic. Maybe all these different variations of the highest is essentially one main idea that is, defined in one specific way. And when you do things like you're talking about right now, archetypally, it like touches something to the core of our being.
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that.
I think so, and that's why I've always been interested in that, like as a storyteller, because that's the stories that have always impacted me did that, and it's always, I think that may be wrapped up in that eternal, unresolvable mystery that I feel like I'm a part of. Like, that's definitely a huge piece of evidence in it. It's like, how do you access that attractiveness that is a universal archetypal emotion or idea? And really, like, as I'm getting older, I'm learning it's not a thinking thing. It's not a rational approach. Yeah. It's like this intuitive feeling approach
that's inside all of us. And I think it's just fresh on my mind from listening to Sam Harris, but the moral landscape is such a interesting idea to me, because ultimately that just defines that there is a good and proper way of thinking and behaving that supports life. And when that is manifested, or when that is acted out, we'll say, it generally brings good within the world. Like, that's the moral landscape, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's could potentially be aligned with what you're talking there, man. Is there's this underlying thing, this theme, this higher principle that just when we act with it and all these different things, like, it just brings forth good results, man. And it's in us all.
Yeah.
We can all identify that.
It's fun.
And like I text you with earlier, it's not like transformation, it's realization. It's just realizing that that's there.
Yeah.
Like this is so cool how this podcast just jumped right into such a high level topic, because even explaining it is hard. You feel something like that. It's intuitive, like you were just saying. So maybe it's so hard to explain that we almost don't believe it's true.
Yeah.
But it has to be felt. And maybe that's the intuitive side that you're talking about.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring this up because, like, I went through a big kick on trying to discover this. And I think C.S. Lewis, theologian and writer, and he was a fiction writer, wrote Narnia, but he did a lot of, like, really powerful, impactful essays. He's kind of what you would call, like, a middle-brow intellectual, where he's really smart, but he tried to write for the common man. You didn't have to be a scholar to understand his stuff. So his essays are really good, and they're not all just strictly on Christianity. But he wrote one, I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. I could look it up. I know he talks about in it men without chests, and at the end of that book, because the general theme is he's trying to get to this moral landscape that you're talking about, and he calls it like the natural law or the law of nature. And his point is that, like, behind every single dogmatic set of rules or commandments, religiously speaking, there is this underlying theme that is kind of primordial in a way. It's more ancient than all of them. So, for example, like almost every single spiritual belief or religion around the world throughout time has the golden rule: treat others as you wish to be treated. And it says it in some form or fashion of that way. So, like, that's one example he takes. He's like, that's clearly got to be a primordial natural law that you could scrape it of all, like what Sam Harris tries to do. He tries to scrape everything, all values and morals from the religious baggage that they have. Exactly. And that's clearly one of them. And he, at the end of the book, he lists, like, all these really ancient laws or codes, like Roman, Egyptian, I think Mesopotamian laws and commandments. Then you can see, like, oh, wow, that became, like, that birthed into, like, some of the 10 Commandments, and that, some of the stuff that Jesus taught, or that became part of Buddhism. So anyway, it's cool because I was on that a lot. I was like, how do we get to this? How do we get to this, like, almost secular, abstract, golden law of nature that's kind of primordial and behind everything? But like you're saying, what I'm saying, it's intuitive. You're
talking alchemy, dog.
Yeah, bro.
You're talking the Philosopher's Stone here, the elixir of life type stuff.
Yeah.
Love me some I think what the avatars are models. Krishna, Buddha, Jesus Christ. They're models for us to attempt to exemplify in our own life. I think a lot of time the true meaning and essence of the story itself is, I don't want to say misunderstood, but it almost like it becomes like a source outside the person themselves. Like, they feel like they just have to behave a certain way so that they one day will be able to experience the true joy that is, in this story, God.
Right.
Or the
or Buddhahood.
Buddhahood, the unconditional love and the source of life itself. But I think when you understand that all they are is a model for us to exemplify, it becomes a model of experience. That's what they are for us.
Yeah.
And maybe we're getting close to that unifying principle that you're talking about when we just see all these stories and all these metaphors and all these examples from history of what people still view as excellence, as all embodiments of something that we could ourselves act out in our own lives and model that in our own lives. And ultimately, maybe that sacrifice to do what they did is the ultimate and truest responsibility of a human life, is like exemplify and aim towards the highest good possible, like regardless of the suffering that you experience and the struggle and the challenges of everyday life.
Yeah.
Just wake up every day and aim higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's funny about that is the ultimate aim, the highest aim is God, whatever that is. But to your point,
just a higher meaning,
yeah,
a higher power, a higher significance, something that brings you that, like, understanding that there's support there with you all along the way.
Yeah. And when I said that, because my point, and I learned this from Jordan, is that whatever is at the height of your hierarchy of values is your God. So the highest value is God, like, quite literally, I think. But to your point about looking beyond the models and not putting, I guess, like, an external source of justice and righteousness out there, that's my whole point. And I think that's why Jordan Peterson got so popular, because he started doing that Bible series where he was going through Genesis, and he was getting back to how they were originally supposed to be read, not on a literalist interpretation, but a symbolic interpretation. This is something that Young lamented about the modern church. He's like, the modern church is becoming too literalist. Everything's got to be literal, and really he placed it in the fact that the church felt the need to defend itself from the rational scientific revolution.
I was just going to say that was during the scientific revolution,
right? And their defense was, well, let's put our strength and our foundation of our spiritual practice in the historicity of it. It's got to be historical fact, and then that led to literal interpretations. And Young was like, bro, you guys are missing the point. Look at the symbology of this stuff. Look at the metaphorical meaning. Look at how
the essence.
Yes, and that's and so you were saying sometimes overlooked, or you didn't know how. Yeah, it absolutely is. And Young and Jordan, I think that's why Jordan Peterson got so popular. That series, people were watching 3-hour lectures on the Bible on YouTube. It has millions of views, but church attendance is down.
Yeah,
nationally, globally, So, but that's all he was doing, was looking at it symbolically.
I did hear him say that recently.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what he's going to do.
Someone talking about him, what it was is he's selling out talking about the biblical series.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what the next book's going to be about. That's why I can't wait. So, yeah, I mean,
that's interesting.
I guess that is an answer to an approach to how we could get closer to this natural law, or whatever you want to call it, unifying principle. Like, it's going to require some type of symbolic, metaphorical interpretation of these meta-narratives that have driven our culture and our species for so long, and
we text each other yesterday about vulnerability. Why do I think it's that? Like, why do I think vulnerability plays into the role of us being able to embody something that is of such high quality nature in an oftentimes very challenging climate?
I mean, I started smiling because immediately I thought of the people that sounds so terrifying to them, the lack of certainty. And that leads me to, I haven't been on him in a long time, but my favorite political philosopher is a guy named Eric Voegelin. Mm-hmm. And that was his whole thing, was like, people would rather believe in certain untruths than to have the faith to believe in uncertain truths. And that's what he saw as the whole root of the issue. I mean, he lived to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and he's like, that's the whole root issue of, the evil qualms of idealism, which is what motivated Jordan Peterson on his path. He was living during the Cold War, and was like, why would people kill themselves for their ideals, for their idealistic beliefs? And Voegelin was like, yeah, it's because they'd rather believe in certain untruths than uncertain truths.
And let's be honest, herd mentality is a real thing. We've all experienced it.
For sure.
It's those are like the heroic moments, man, when someone can stand for what's good, dude, when everyone else isn't.
Yeah.
That takes a freaking hero in my mind.
Yeah. And that requires vulnerability to put yourself out there. Put yourself out there to step up and to be ridiculed by society and your group, in your culture, to stand up for what's good or what you believe is right.
And false ideals create false motivation, I think, man.
Mm-hmm. That's good too. Yeah, and then you're stuck on a negative feedback loop, and you're wondering,
like, you're not working on the moral landscape that we were talking earlier.
Yeah.
When you're like honoring something that isn't necessarily supportive of anything
other than your own ego of certainty.
Yeah.
Your own feeling of your own fear of uncertainty, which I feel like would stroke your ego. I just always come back to that. I feel like
that's where vulnerability comes in,
right?
Because now I'm going to jump in and me be vulnerable. Welcome to episode 54. Hey, we went in on heavy.
Didn't waste no time.
No, ooh, I need a mental timeout real quick. 30 seconds. Nah, let's jump back into it. So I think so when I listened to when I read the true definition of introversion, I was like, oh, that's me, right? So the true definition of introversion from what I read from this book that I found of a quality source was, this person can still go out in public and interact and engage and connect, but they need to then go into solitude and reset themselves.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly considered myself that. Was like, dude, I could still go out, I could do this, but then I have to like go into solitude, and like so grateful for the home that God's blessed me with, because it allows me the opportunity to do that. Like so helpful for my mental health. Like I think so many, now that I no longer believe that I don't deserve the things I have, I'm just so grateful for them. I'm like, dude, cool, right on. Like stop beating yourself up all the time, man.
Yeah.
Like just enjoy what you got. So I know that that's real good for my mental health. But I've been kind of picking apart more of like why it's so hard for me to like, when I'm not like in my, I would say, professional environment where that would be coaching. I can get out there and coach doesn't bother me. I can go be a school counselor, doesn't bother me. Go counsel, doesn't bother me. But then like I felt a little angst when it comes to like interacting people outside. And like I didn't want to get exposed or something. And I figured that shit out recently. Is like I'm so vulnerable, and I've put myself and devoted myself to elevating life for anyone that I have the opportunity to work with. But at the same time, I ain't perfect. So I had this like underlying unconscious vulnerability that was nothing that I was even aware of, man, till like a few days ago. And I was like, dude, you're like, you've elevated yourself to this idea that you've committed your life to empowering and inspiring and motivating and uplifting and counseling and all these things. But what if they saw some of your flaws? And I would like hide, dude. Literally, I literally caught myself like, dude, I'm hiding because of this fear of being exposed for someone seeing who I really am and not accepting that. And dude, it was identifying that, and then such a helpful episode, man. Like you guys want to talk about how this is therapeutic for us. Like when we did our end of year review and I said, it's okay not to be perfect, but it's also okay to pursue it. That allowed me to let all that go, man. And was like, accept me for who I am. And I'm just going to be that. And if that's not something that resonates with you, it's not part of your attractor field, going back to like what we were talking about earlier, I will always be here if you want that, but I'm not going to allow that to interfere with what the heck I got to go and do with my own life. So I'm just feeling way more, we talk about openness, man. Like I'm just feeling so wide open, so authentic. Like I'm just going to always 100% be what I think I am and then see what happens, man. Because I feel like I've been gifted with the opportunity to understand some of these things you talked about earlier. Maybe there is an underlying good that if we fell into that and felt, think, and behave through it, that our life would potentially have more positive moments and experiences of awe. Well, I'm just going to do that. And if people think it's stupid, that just means I got to do it more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So vulnerability takes an immense amount of commitment to developing willpower, dog. Willpower. Because if you're going to go out there and like legit contend and like stand for something and do what's good, you better have an elevated ability to choose to do things voluntarily that you don't want to do. And then stick to your guns. And if people think it's stupid, but you believe that what you're doing is right, go and see what happens. I think that's the most noble path. I think that's like the unified path that we're talking about.
Yeah, I see the ties between vulnerability and like, to me, everything you just said, I was like thinking about myself, and I was like, that the most interesting people that I've ever like looked up to, or famous people that I'm like, oh God, they seem so cool. I realized, I guess a couple years back, they're just being themselves.
Yeah.
Like there's just so many times where they're just so genuinely themselves that's cool. And I really boiled it down to that. And so it was kind of like, to your point, like, I I get completely where you're coming from, like why you would have that.
Can I help you with this real quick? What about authentic self-expression requires vulnerability?
Yeah, I think so. Because you have to be able to have that courage and to step into that vulnerability to be yourself unapologetically. You know, that's not to say to go be a rude, jackass, but
the courage to do what is good.
Yeah. But even so so like striving for that, because I feel like with your point, you're like, well, I'm striving for good, but I'm also a flawed human, and I'm very aware of that.
Yeah.
And what if people see that? And my whole point, I love to smoke cigars. I love cigars, and there was a point where, this is just a small example, but there was a point where it was like, well, I'm trying to be this filmmaker and this author, and I write about, being a good person, blah, blah. I do this podcast now, and it's like, some people really look down on cigars, it could be bad for you. I don't think they're bad for you. I really enjoy them. And at some point I was just like, you know what? This is me, and I actually have a really endearing reason why I like cigars, and I like the smell of the smoke of cigars, and so I'm just going to be me. And I started posting, videos on social media where I have one in my mouth and I'm talking and stuff like that. Yeah. But that was a very minuscule point, but it was like, I completely get what you're saying. It's like,
no, it's like you became very comfortable with who you are, man. I think I think when it comes to anything health wise, like that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you just find comfort in your own skin,
yeah,
and then meet the demands that are coming upon you,
yeah,
that seems like a real valid thing.
Yeah, but to your point, it's going to take a lot of a willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, I grew up the opposite. I can relate so much to what you're talking about, because I was always like, almost to a point of bad. It was bad, like being a people pleaser, and like. I was one way with one crowd and the other way with this crowd just to be accepted, or like playing my buddy Kenny. We need to have him on because he'd rip me apart, but we lived together in college and stuff. And he one point came to me and he's like, I was doing something, I was being goofy, and he's like, you get into these roles where you're acting like somebody, and he goes, I think it's hilarious, but sometimes I just want like the real you. And that was really like, at the time I was like, oh, shut up, man. But I'm like, no, I would like, and sometimes it's not even nefarious or bad. It's like, oh, I'm really, like for Jordan Peterson, it's like, I'm on a big Jordan Peterson kick, so I'm going to act like Jordan Peterson, and it's like, that's just a small example. But, like I would do that with people, and he's like, you're in these roles. You're playing a part.
What a great example of vulnerability by Kenny, man.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, his intentions were for the highest good for you, and his intentions were in the right place.
Yeah.
So that requires that statement right there required a lot of vulnerability. That required a lot of building of a relationship. That required a lot of, I'm sure there was trust involved. I'm sure you guys felt safe in talking to each other and having these conversations. Like that's real, that's vulnerability. Like vulnerability almost has to be earned.
Yeah. I think that goes, part and parcel with just having deep, meaningful relationships. If you only have subsurface relationships, it's almost a sacrifice of the truth. Like for that point right there, Kenny was just speaking the truth.
Yeah.
But if we only had a subsurface level relationship, probably would have not said it.
Yeah.
And so how many times in our lives have we, God, unwillingly or even subconsciously sacrificed a moment for the truth to be spoken because we didn't invest in the meaningful relationship that needed, it's like the flower bed for the seeds of truth to be planted.
Yeah. I would honestly say that the relationship between me and my oldest daughter has improved so much since I've just chosen to express my truest self in every context. Period. Our relationship has actually improved. There's no more, I was very opinionative, I had high expectations, all these things that a parent needs. There needs to be that demand, but I think the demand comes more from the example that's being set, and then the natural expression of who you are as a person to kind of humanize things, and then find that common ground, maybe that moral landscape between the two people that creates a healthy relationship. Just met her on her terms, man, and she's met me on my terms, and honestly the relationship's really solid now, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you're talking 18, so she's again grown up. Right. She's moved out. Like
that helps.
Yeah, like the conditions have, set the stage for a healthier relationship to evolve. But it has, and it really is just like I don't need to feel like dead space anymore. Like I just let the void sit there. Like if we're having, like tonight we were having dinner, like I rarely say anything. I just listen now. I just listen.
Yeah. So you're saying
I listen more.
You always felt like the need to like in that exists.
Well,
like
you had no. See, I wouldn't. It was always, and again, that probably comes from the self judgment that I surrendered, recently. Because when the only way you could judge another is if you have judgment for self, because it exists within, so it's manifesting through a projection onto the other person, right? It's you having to get out that which is literally percolating within. It's just an unhealthy defense mechanism. But it wasn't a prodding. It was just what I would feel inside, and I couldn't naturally experience the moments, and I would almost detach, bro. Like,
what was your motivation? Like, because you felt like you needed to teach her, or like
it's just what I became. It's just through this process that we've really gone on together. Yeah, like I don't know. I'm just very like comfortable in my own, like my skin now, and saying like, dude, this is who I am. Like, consider like I have high self-esteem. I have high self-compassion. I have high self-confidence. Like, just embody those and express those things. Even when it comes in your relationships, like don't require or expect anything. Just do your best to make it something that's healthy and productive.
Yeah. And
if the situations don't align and you see that the other party isn't reciprocating, like, okay, you don't have to have an opinion. Like, don't entertain it.
Right.
Don't entertain it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So yeah, that's being vulnerable. Like, being vulnerable is not having to like always state what your opinion is about things and your judgments on things. Like, biting your tongue takes a lot of vulnerability, which, for the record, vulnerability leads into courage. Mm-hmm. Like the overcoming of this vulnerability that we're talking about is achieved through when you embody courage, man. Mm-hmm. To have to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
To commit and devote my life to support everything that I possibly can, and however many versions of creativity that I'm given the opportunity to, like. But like you said, have the courage to say, I'm still not perfect though, but you understand the ideas, so share them. Mm-hmm. Like, share the information. Like, that's what this podcast is. It's just an open source of information of two men coming together and sharing their experience. Yeah. In the hopes that it, could potentially bring value to someone. Like, that's vulnerable, man. That takes courage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get what you're saying, because I've been there too. And like you're saying, there's some strength in relinquishing the necessity to, for me, like, just always to have something to say.
100%. I've come to, dude, and this is such a how I show tonight. I've literally, like, again, I'm really passionate about understanding how we can use our minds to influence health and performance. Really infatuated by that. So I'm really always paying attention to what's occurring, and that I guess we could essentially call that mindfulness. Yeah. A big idea that I've been reading lately, The Mindful Body, Professor Ellen Langer, great book, man. It's really opened me up to these ideas of beliefs and how beliefs really are a really important thing to consider. But anyhow, I'll think, is what you're about to say going to bring any source of value to this situation right now? Because if it's not, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, even tonight, right? And that's another thing, man. Vulnerability takes. Not everyone is. If you're listening to the show right now and and it's resonating with you, like, not everyone thinks like us, and you've got that's like a huge step in vulnerability, is understanding that, being so comfortable in your own skin that, dude, even though not everyone thinks like this, like, I know that it's true for me, and therefore I'm going to stand in it, while at the same time not putting it on them.
Right.
Don't proselytize or nothing like that, which is what I used to do.
Yeah.
So, for example, tonight they're talking about one of Kylie's neighbors, not the nicest lady in the world. Certain words were said. They both agreed. Maybe before it would have been like, come on, y'all. Like, don't talk about people like that. Like, that's not nice. Like, I just ate my dinner, dude.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's their perception. That's where they're at. Like, if I put my opinion in this situation right here, like, there's nothing good going to come from it. Yeah. It's going to create defensiveness. A division will be set in place. I was looking for like a cool, like, medieval term or something. A division. The two fronts have assembled.
That's a good one.
The two fronts have assembled.
Yeah.
just because I had to say what I believed to them.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are my beliefs.
Yeah,
Why do I have to put my beliefs on you?
exactly.
So you unify the fronts, man. And by doing so, you just find a way to get as close together to the moral landscape as you can.
Yeah.
I don't know. That takes vulnerability.
I think maybe, hear me out on this. Maybe
It's
that's
fun, man. I'm having a great time tonight. Holy
Same.
smokes.
Maybe that's what Jesus meant by don't cast pearls before swine.
That's exactly what he meant.
Because what you're getting at is like, I almost feel like if people aren't asking for help, they're not going to want it.
So I'm not going to give it.
Exactly.
And
so that's what I feel like he was saying with that. Like,
and that's not, and to me, that's not a mean idea.
no.
Because ultimately, it's almost disrespectful to them if we do put pearls in front of them. They don't want the pearls right now. They want the coal.
Right. Right.
But once they realize that within that coal is a pearl and they potentially come around to get some guidance, then you're, oh, yeah, let's do it, man.
Exactly. Yeah.
We talked about that a little bit, I think, the last episode or a couple episodes back, about just making sure that your relationships are plant this. That's what we were talking about. Plant the seed and nurture it. And if the seed doesn't nurture that's just not the season for it.
Right. Right.
But maybe there'll be another season for it.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. And that's the point to what Kenny was saying and what I was trying to make with the truth. Like, you can't, if you haven't planted those seeds and set that firm foundation of a meaningful relationship where you've shown yourself, hey, I have good intentions. I'm here. I'm not trying to force anything on you. I'm here to support emotionally. Then that seed will look for nourishment once that foundation and that ground has been laid, I think.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you, do you think people can feel when you're not being authentic?
For sure. For sure.
Why do you say that?
I just think that's one of those unconscious gifts we have as humans. I know I can't. I mean, dude, I could tell you really crazy stories. I think predominantly it was because I moved around a lot. Mm-hmm. And you probably have some of this too because you moved a lot too. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I moved 11 times by the time I was 14, and I could just read people, and I feel like I still can now in a way that maybe most people just don't pay attention to. And not to say that's anything that I've, like, honed. It's just, like, because I've seen so many people. I've been around so many different cultures and groups. But, like, there was an example. We were hanging out with this family friend that had befriended my dad, and he had a business partner, and they had their own business together. And I don't know what it was, but every time I was around him, I'd get this sketchy vibe. And I literally said to my dad, we went to a Rangers game. They invited us to a Rangers game in their suite, and he was there. You know, my dad's buddy is there. That's his business partner. And I just leaned over and was like, bro, I don't know what it is about that guy, but I think he's sketchy. Like, I think he's up to something. And my dad's like, oh, really? Wow, I've never really thought that, you know, and we went about our day. Well, like 2 weeks later, my dad calls me into the room. He's like, bro, I forget the guy's name. He says, my buddy just called me and he said he found out his business partner was stealing money from the company. And that, you know, right under his nose, he's like, that you called it. So
it's intuitive.
Yeah.
That's that thing maybe you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That's that like core assumption that when it's not met, it creates like trauma. It's traumatic.
Yeah.
It's traumatic to the system.
And it shows.
And it shows.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a preparation sensor. Prepare for tough times to come.
Yeah. And also too, I think if you're not living by any kind of, or your moral standard is selfishness and greed, that will I think it might affect you. Look, I mean, let's be honest. You know this. There's a connection between the soul and the body and the mind.
Yeah. And
if your soul is crippled and dipped in ooze because of the moral choices you make, I would. There's obviously no way to prove this, but I would hearken to believe that that's going to have a physical exterior consequence.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's what I was picking up on was like, I could just tell this guy was up to something. I don't know how else to put it. Like,
maybe it's like an embodiment of it, and that just that's what creates out through it.
That's interesting to think about too. Like for me with storytelling and bad guys, because I always, you know, I think it's interesting how bad guys are depicted, right? And like if you're someone who's a bad guy, you're a villain in a movie, you know, how do they look, and what would that do to your body and your appearance? You know, maybe there's a reason why those are archetypal images too. Yeah. I don't know.
Like why that'd be like a really interesting research study to tell people to describe what evil looks like and then find like a common pattern.
Yeah.
And I bet it's in there, dude.
Yeah, I bet.
It's in there.
Yeah.
I think that segment that we were talking, or that segment of good, bad that we were talking about, actually, that's what started the pre-show conversation that we're going to send out live just to show that this is really what we are. At one end of this segment is bad, and then on the other is good. It's two ends of the same pole. Like everybody has the potential within them to be bad, and everyone equally has the potential to be good. And we believe that meaning, value, and belief lie in there. But ultimately, I like how you use moral choice, man, because I think your moral choice is where you land on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, dude, we riffed it on Oppenheimer for a long time when that came out, and I still come back to, as far as like a visual showing of what you're talking about, like, God forbid the day that you have to go on trial for anything, but where your character is put on trial, because that's what happened to him. And every single decision that could be maybe morally judged was called into question. And he made some immoral choices, like cheating on his wife. And you, again, to the point that I was trying to make that day in that episode, and what I think you're making is like, you might think it's just a small decision now, whatever it is, but it's like that, it is bringing you closer one way or the other, like every single moral choice. Yeah.
And you could fluctuate on this segment, right?
For sure, yeah.
I see it as a very positive thing. I think it shows our humanity, that we all have bad, the potential for bad. Like the Auschwitz guard that enjoyed his job. I think the opposite of that is good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of Solzhenitsyn's quote, which is dividing line between good and evil runs down every human heart. And that book is freaking wild, what Soviet Russia went through, and the gulags. But
it's fascinating when you think about the potential for good and bad.
Yeah.
There's so much potential for good.
For sure.
Like, I hope what we're doing is good.
Yeah, I think so.
But there's also so much out there that's bad.
I mean, what do you think of immediately that blocks people from reaching that potential for good?
Bro, vulnerability, man.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that because it's what we're talking about on the show, but how vulnerable is that because if you commit to something like that, like you've got to bring that into everything that you're going into.
Yeah.
Like, for this to really be a path for your life that you're considering, like just aiming towards what's good, you've got to be paying attention for that all the time. And that puts you vulnerable because you're not going to be perfect.
Right.
It's okay not to be perfect, like we talked about in episode 52.
Yeah.
But man, to put yourself out there like that and potentially get mobbed because everyone thinks it's stupid or you're just an outlier.
Yeah.
But maybe, man, it's the outliers that make the biggest change, man.
Yeah. I think my answer I completely agree with you. And I think wrapped up in my answer is fear.
Yeah.
I hearken back to like a lot of those Nazis or even people in Soviet Russia, and a lot of them were like, well, I was just following orders, and it's because they were afraid not to, which is wrapped up in you're afraid to be in the vulnerable position of a subordinate, like someone who's insubordinate to their orders and stuff, or insubordinate to what the rest of the neighborhood's going with as far as turning in Jews and stuff like that. So
can I break that down to the core?
Yeah. What's the core of that?
Fear of vulnerability.
Right. There you go.
That's a real fear. But the antidote is courage.
Yeah.
And responsibility.
Man, this is crazy because vulnerability.
All right, here's an exciting note. Let's bring in, let's take a break real quick. All right, let's take a left and we'll come back to the more metaphysical, spiritual side of what we're talking about tonight. But let's talk about this idea of courage and how we can leverage willpower to embrace vulnerability, okay? So let's bring some science in. Okay? So recently discovered, or not necessarily recently discovered, but recently studied in depth is this part of the anterior cingulate cortex, a region in our brain that has been said to house and be the seat of the will to live. Now, here's what's exciting about it. it literally grows. It grows and shrinks depending on the amount of choices that you make, kind of like I said earlier, to do things in your life that you are afraid to do or you don't want to do, but still voluntarily choose to do them. This part of our brain grows, develops our willpower to later on be able to put ourselves in challenging moments and then choose to voluntarily take it on with courage and responsibility and love. These high quality moral landscape, good, aim high qualities that we can all resonate with. When you say courage, responsibility, and love, everyone feels something good inside themselves. That's what we're harking on tonight on episode 54. So the more and more you go out into the world and like make those choices to, you want to turn the other way. You don't want to engage this person and just say hello. You don't want to pick up that piece of trash, but you still do it. You're growing the seat in your brain that houses the will to live. And the more and more you do these things voluntarily, the more and more you expand your system and your ability to feel, think, and behave in a way that constantly matches that, and it grows and expands. But here's the interesting part, and this is the most motivating thing for me, is the moment you like doing the thing that you're voluntarily choosing to do, the growth stops. How fascinating is that? So if that's not motivation, bringing in some cognitive science to the show, and then we'll get back to the spiritual side of things, is this idea that we're talking about, being vulnerable, putting yourself out there, having the opportunity for someone to say that what you're doing is stupid, or you're different, or like a kid said to me the other day, God, Coach Perez, you're always like so upbeat. What are you on? Nothing, man. Just stoked to be here and stoked to be alive. Like, that takes vulnerability, man. But the more and more, like, in those moments when you develop this thing in your brain, you can meet those moments confident in yourself, saying, yeah, man, this is who I am. You've developed the will to live. So maybe like genuine self-expression comes when you continuously, voluntarily choose to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you know are good for you, because ultimately you start elevating onto higher opportunities to bring that same principle into your life. And the next thing you know, you're capable of handling challenges that you never thought possible. But it takes vulnerability, and then we inject courage into that. And then go be responsible.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I think Nietzsche would love what you just said. But that was Nietzsche's whole point. Like, you just gave the physiological grounding to what Nietzsche was trying to get to with his will to power.
The psychophysiology? The psychophysiology?
Yeah, bro. Nietzsche his whole thing with like the will to power was he was lamenting at what humanity had become. We had lost that will to power, that will to live. And to me, what you just said wrapped up completely the adventurer, the archetype of the adventurer, the person that's going out there and taking on challenges, or the hero, if you want to call him. And that's why Nietzsche was so big on Greek mythology. He was very, very pre-Christian, because he saw, look at Hercules, the 12 labors of Hercules, and what he went out and did, and fighting Cerberus and fighting the Hydra. And it's like, this guy's will, like, imagine his, his house for the will to live, how large that would have been.
Yeah.
Like, that guy's life force energy was so big, whether he was real or not, but it's about the symbology again of it, the moral behind it. And he was saying like Prometheus was his hero. The guy, think about that. That guy went and stole fire from the gods and brought it to humanity, and was punished for it. But again, it's like a daring, heroic adventurer spirit that's willing to embrace challenges. And like you're saying, we have physiological proof that will improve your will to live. And that's the will to power for Nietzsche. But the problem he was seeing in modernity, and he was ahead of his time in that way, like he was like, people are losing that. People are losing that will to live. It's almost like we focus too much on death, or like a comfortability or a
what will come once this is done.
Yeah.
Not necessarily focused on the experience right now.
Right. So I don't know, man. That's such a strange. That's a huge ball of yarn for me as far as that dichotomy. But I love that. I love what you said. I think that's very Nietzschean philosophically. Cool.
No, it's I think what's exciting too is it gives everyone that like literal explanation for it. I think that's why I found so much value in it.
Yeah.
It's like, telling, exposure therapy is so helpful. Narrative therapy is so helpful because it's almost, I think I guess the best, you kind of challenge the person, man. You kind of challenge them a little bit and you take them to those places of discomfort to where they can see that they can handle it and process through it and see through it. And maybe this isn't exactly what they thought it was. And maybe they were believing about it in a way that wasn't healthy for them. And it's all exposing them to the descent to allow for the ascent.
Yeah.
Because the descent always comes before the ascent. We got to go into those challenges. All those stories, like these all come from the same idea that we started initially with this show, this universal good, this moral landscape, this way of being that when it's acted out brings good, productive experiences into people's lives.
Yeah.
And I think that aligns very well with this idea of just knowing that, I don't know, man. This show right here's got me really thinking tonight, bro.
I'll say this.
This show's got
what we just broke down is like,
I'm lost for words, honestly. Like,
well,
I'm real excited by this idea and how you just put that together, man. That was cool. Oh, thank you. The message in these stories. That's what I was going to say. The message that you were just talking about Greek mythology and how Prometheus went and brought fire down. I mean, all these challenging stories that we hear, they're all narratives from that good that we were describing earlier.
Right.
Like they're all ways of acting that out. That's what these stories provide us.
Yeah, it was a way to live. Yeah, absolutely. And
there you go.
That's what myth was meant to be. It was a way to be. It was about being. That's how our ancient ancestors taught how to live. I was going to say this. That is what we just broke down is way more motivating than what you could call a Goggins-style approach. Now, let me preface, I love Goggins. I know you do too. And I think that guy's a badass.
Yeah.
But his whole thing of, we'll do hard shit so it calluses your mind. Well, that's the same thing that we're saying, but I feel like the way we're saying it and the way that we broke it down is way more motivating, at least to me. Yeah. As far as like to me, like you gotta understand us as like human nature. We're here. We're the most adaptable creatures in the world. It's an amazing, baffling miracle that we are where we are and we're on like at the top of the food chain. We've done what we've done. I mean, just look the past 150 years, a meteoric rise in advancement. And there is this inherent willpower to being a human. And if you're not trying to live up to that and live in that, then what even are you? Like, it's almost a lament for the death of humanity when Nietzsche says that modern man has lost that will to power, that will to live. I just think it's when I heard you say that, I was like, oh, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Like you have life in you. Why would you not live in that will to live? If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And if I may kind of piggyback off kind of how you were, his motivation definitely gets people out of bed and gets them moving. But I think what we're trying to hit home tonight is this type of motivation that we're talking about won't cause you to compare yourself to others.
Yeah.
Because here's the scary thing about some of those motivations of hustle, work hard. Like, you're constantly going to put yourself in a position of comparison because you're always going to be thinking about who's doing more than you.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Am I going hard enough?
Am I going hard enough? Like driving home today, knowing we're going to record tonight, seeing a guy running. And I felt that angst, but thankfully I'm aware of it now of like, why aren't you running right now? But then this goes back to authenticity and being able to be vulnerable and learn who you really are and stand for what's true to you. I'm like, because that's just not what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Who I am is I'm a guy who's about to go home, hang out with his family, record a podcast with his best friend, read for a little bit probably, and go to sleep. Like, that's just you today. You'll get your workout in tomorrow.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, you already worked out today, so why the hell are you being so hard on yourself?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Like, that type of motivation, I love it. I love that hoorah, but that could elicit a sense of fear, man.
For sure.
Because it's like, if I'm not living up to this, kind of what I was feeling maybe with that vulnerability, right? This puts us, if we don't understand how to manage vulnerability, like that puts us into it without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Because we're in a place of like, we're never going to be enough unless we're acting like that.
No, I know. I've been there.
But what if you take what we're talking about tonight is, be where your feet are and then do your absolute best to make the best of it.
Yeah.
And then constantly make choices that are hard for you to make, but you do voluntarily, and then you'll get better at that.
Yeah.
And your neural circuitry, neuroplasticity will kick in. You'll start rewiring some nice beliefs. You'll feel better. You'll think better. You'll behave better. And it all comes with the ultimate value and the ultimate meaning.
Yeah. What's cool about that approach too is it's much more varied in its scalable.
It's applicable. It's replicable.
Yeah,
and valid across context. Like, that's what good motivation is. Like, I feel like what we're talking about, we can give to someone who can't run or like physically work out.
Exactly.
Where like, if they listen to really uplifting motivation that's for like the high performing individual, may not be the right move. Same principle. It comes from the same thing that we were talking about, that we've been talking about all show.
Yeah.
That universal good and whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
But it comes from that.
Right.
It's just doing what's good for life.
Yep. And what challenges you in that moment.
Yeah.
And knowing that it'll scale and grow. And like you said, with the example of picking up trash, even though you don't want to. Like,
it's one more rep, dude.
Yeah. Find something you don't want to do and go do it. You don't have to go run 4 miles.
That's a mental rep for the will to live.
Yep.
You're using mind power to influence.
Yeah. Love it. There we go.
Man.
Good stuff.
Great stuff.
I like where that landed.
Yeah. Vulnerability is the recap. Shoot.
Yeah.
Go out there and have the courage to be vulnerable, because when people see who you really are, they'll feel safe. They'll trust you, and then all of a sudden they'll interact with you, collaborate with you, ask for your help, provide you opportunities, bring you into conversations. What a great way to live as a social animal.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, and I like how that willingness to be vulnerable requires a relinquishing of who you think you should be, and an openness to just who you are. And then once you've done that, you can take this principle of these reps for the will to live that we landed on, and go out there and seek adventure, seek challenge in your own way, however that looks.
For sure. The choice the choice for authentic self-expression as often as you possibly can literally grows the will to live.
Say that again.
The choice to authentically self-express develops the will to live. Because that takes a choice every moment.
Yeah.
Choosing to not be influenced by the external, and then just express forth the internal that you have really developed for yourself.
Yeah. That's good.
And the more you take those reps, you choose to do something that you don't necessarily want to do, but you do it and it kind of works out. You literally develop your willpower.
Yep.
And your ability to engage in higher level challenges.
Yeah.
Simply by finding what's good to you, finding what means a lot to you, finding what brings you a lot of value, and then expressing that. And what a choice to bounce back when you fall short. Mm. You're developing your will to live by doing that. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to bounce back. You don't want to have to cope with the idea that maybe you're flawed and made a mistake and potentially have to ask for forgiveness, but you still make the choice to do it. You're developing the will to live, man.
Yep. Love it.
What a heroic path that could potentially have been set forth, man. Mm-hmm. Find what's good to you that generally interacts well with multiple contexts, like context variability. Like, make sure that it's something that you have seen to work well, and then do your absolute best to just act that out on a day-to-day.
It sounds like a great adventure.
Dude, what an adventure, man. Stand in the cold and greet kids coming into a school in 15-degree temperature just because you feel like the version of you would do that.
Yep.
That choice was hard. I don't want to stand out in freezing temperatures for 30 minutes, but I did because I felt that was what I stand for would do. Mm-hmm. So I did it. Did people think it was stupid? Probably, but that just meant I had to do it more.
Yeah, it's about being uncomfortable.
And as I was out there, I was like, I'm literally developing my will to live.
It's cool.
Because I'm making the choice voluntarily to do something I don't want to do.
Yep.
Think about that idea in every moment. I want to participate in this negative conversation. I want to talk crap. I want to join in the gossip. I want to become a part of herd mentality. I'm not coming up with my own beliefs. Like, no, man, challenge all that and make the choice to go in the opposite direction and just see what happens.
Yeah. Love it.
I'd be so curious to find out what would happen.
Yep. Who you become on that
Actually,
path.
all that matters is we do it individually.
Yeah.
And then that's what we'll do. We'll just talk about it on the show. How about that?
Perfect. Damn.
That was a really good episode. We got some mental reps in tonight, man.
For sure.
I think we created some special. I like how this is creativity to us now.
Yeah.
It wasn't that before.
No.
I think from about episode 52 on, about the past 3 episodes, it's just become a creative act for us.
Yeah. Yep. Just putting it out there.
Yeah. And true creativity is self-expression.
Yeah.
So I think we were onto something tonight, man.
For sure. That's true. Like, yeah. Good stuff.
Man. When you're creative, when you're being creative, and again, remember, creativity could be brought forth into anything. You can create. You're literally creating your experience of life on a moment by moment basis. Like, maybe true good creativity comes from expressing that thing, capital T, that we've been alluding to all show.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes from that, and when you express that, that's what we call creativity because it's beautiful in the world.
Yeah.
It's just like a river flowing from one end to the next, man. And we just get to be the ones that witness it.
Yeah, you're
and observe it.
That. You're channeling that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Channels. Channels are water, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Channel that. Hopefully you can channel something that we riffed on. Pure flow state. Couldn't even tell you. I didn't look at the clock once in this show. Yeah.
It was flowing, man. I'm like just now coming back to reality. Lights. I'm looking around like, oh gosh.
Yeah, we were recording.
I'm in this world right now. No, that was deep, y'all. I enjoyed that. I hope you guys got value. That was a really fun conversation.
For sure.
Really fun conversation. Got something out of that for sure. All right. Well, that's that.
That's that.
Episode 54. Vulnerability, courage to do it, all kinds of fun stuff. Talking about the moral landscape, the highest good. Using all the stories that have come down from history as models that we live by. And I don't know, this was a cool one.
It was.
What you thinking, man, before we head out?
Just another well-rounded, multivariable approach to finding solution.
Cool.
Thought we hit it.
Sounds good to me. Hey, subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music.
I was going to say YouTube, but you got mad last time.
YouTube. Did I?
You don't remember that at the end?
What'd I say?
I don't know. You were like,
Oh,
doing something. You're like,
oh, no. I was like,
no,
dude, we got
83 people say we're the best on podcast. I was just telling them to. I was laughing at it in that.
Oh yeah, my defense. Oh yeah, my unconscious. Yes, that
I'm
is
just
true.
telling them to subscribe to YouTube. If they want
That's
to.
true. I was like, oh, my unconscious guilt my unconscious shame just came out, man. No, yeah, subscribe, man. Why not? We got new lights. I hope the lighting was good for those who are watching.
Yeah.
We're under the lights.
Yeah.
I always had a dream, man, of one day recording something, of having lights. Everyone has those big visions, when they're coming up in the world. Here we are, man. This is pretty cool.
Yep.
Granted, it's where we are, but to us, it's special.
Yeah.
To us, this is crazy special. So, if you're watching, man, love.
Appreciate
True love, unconditional love from us, man.
Yeah.
I hope the ultimate pill is something that brings hope and inspiration and encouragement to your life. Cool. Let's just keep sharing our experience, man.
Sure.
As authentically as possible. Later, y'all.
See ya.